reports and export information and data. You know, your online application is a database. And, you know, we're asking applicants for information, so it makes sense that any information they're putting in, you should be able to pull out. And so we're going to talk about, we're going to start with the basics, kind of where do you go in the system to pull reports and export information. And then we're going to talk a little bit about, you know, different reports that are there that you might not know about and some tricks and stuff. And then we'll kind of open it up to questions and actually go to maybe the release site and look at some things. That's kind of how I plan the day. You know, and I'm always open, like I said, to questions and stuff. So if you guys, you know, have some questions, put them in the chat and we can talk about them. And it might be a really good example that we might want to go to a site and actually look at something and look at some data or some report ideas and stuff. So let's get started. So it's important to know that there are two different ways, I'm going to close this so it doesn't block the view, to access data in the system for reporting purposes. We have reports and we have export information. And in my mind, I think this way, reports are static. You know, they're in this predetermined, organized manner on a page. They're pretty and stuff. And then export information is really that Excel-like data so that you can filter it and you can sort it and, you know, just like Excel. But they're still reports. They're just two different ways. So reports are that fixed, static, and Excel is more, you know, sortable, or export is that more sortable way of getting information. A lot of times we put data in the export information because there's so much information it's not going to fit on one page. So that's another reason why data might be found under that menu rather than a report menu. Just kind of keep that in your mind when you go to look for data, why it might be under one menu option versus another. So hopefully that kind of helps. Another important thing to remember is pop-up blockers. You know, if you've never used the system, or if you've had maybe a browser update, or if you've cleared your cache in your browser history or something, when you go to open a report, they open in a second window, or, you know, they're open as a PDF in another browser window, and nothing happens. It's because you need to enable or disable your pop-up blockers. Depending on which browser you use, it looks a little different. If you're using Chrome, it's typically in the upper right-hand corner. There's a little red X. You click on it and you say allow for the site. If it's Edge, it's usually at the bottom of the screen. So just be aware, a lot of times we get panic calls from like a hiring manager saying it doesn't work, nothing's happening, and it's usually something as simple as a pop-up blocker. But, you know, each browser operates a little differently. And I do have a really nice resource if you're interested on pop-up blockers, and I can share that with you. And pop-up blockers specifically with all the different types of browsers and devices. You know, it even talks about like tablets and on how to enable pop-up blockers on an iPhone. So, you know, shoot me an email at support and I can share that information with you. Reports, there's two main menus on the job application system where you access reports. One is the job report menu, and one is the applicant report menu. The job report menu deals with reports related to posted and filling positions, and that menu is limited to users with the role of HR administrator, or if you're a co-op site, it's limited to those with the role of HR district administrator. We don't give hiring managers access typically to that menu. I mean, if for some reason you wanted to, you could work with a support team to modify permissions, but typically that screen is reserved for HR only. Okay. And when you get to that menu, the first thing you always do is you need to select the report you want. And based on the report you select, your next screen will look a little different. You're going to select your options, but it's a little different. The stock reports on that job report menu are the board agenda, the job posting, new hire, position summary. So I put in a quick little, definition of what those are. And I'm going to share this PowerPoint with everybody today so you can have a copy of this to refer back to. So like I said, the first thing you always do is you select the report, and then you have this option over here on the right. If you don't want it to put the title, you can give it a new title. I'll print it on the top of the screen if you want to. That's what this report title option is. And then depending on the report you select, you have to pick your criteria. So for the job posting bulletin, your criteria really is by interest type. And if you could do all of an interest type or by particular job. But if you pick a different report, you might have maybe school year or other things, maybe a unit or something else. So it really depends on which report you pick, what your criteria options are going to be. And then once you've selected all your criteria, you're going to press preview. By default, all of the reports always, the output always goes to PDF. That's kind of the most common and easiest report option. Most people prefer that. But you do have the option to switch it to Excel or HTML. If you switch it to Excel, it will put it in Excel. But if you want to make it sortable and stuff, you kind of have to know how to clean up delete some extra lines and spaces and stuff. And if you would want us to show you how to do that, we can show you how to do that. It just has to do with that, making it fit pretty on a page and stuff, where it's not a true Excel report like an export is. And we'll get to that as we kind of move on in the presentation. So here's an example of what that job posting bulletin looks like after you open it. So it's similar to what the job request looks like. We've got the job number, we've got our status, here's your routing information. On our test site, we only have one router. On most sites, there's probably a couple of routers, and the date it was approved. You've got all that lovely information. And depending on what's on your job request, there would be more typically information or less, depending on how you've customized your job request to look. Applicant reports is its own menu item underneath the management menu. This menu, we typically do give access to anybody who has one of those supervisor roles, our hiring managers. So anybody with a supervisor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, we typically give access to the reports menu because it helps them in the screening process. It can be useful to pull an applicant report. They can use it to get a list just to help them while they're screening. Some people actually create really nice screening reports based off addendums and things, so that we want our screeners to be able to pull that to help them in the process of screening applicants. So this is the second report menu on the job system that is available. It works just like job reports, but there's a lot more criteria that you have the option to select from. And there's a lot more stock reports available. And here's just, a sampling of some of those. This is where you can go to do the create merge file report. So if you want to send out a mass email to a group of applicants, this is where you can go to do that. You can do labels, get an address listing, just send out an email, get a list of everybody's email, name, and so on. This is where you can go. A file screen report. So if you're a district that does your file screens under applicant search, you can come here and pull that file screen data for a particular job under this menu. So it's kind of nice. So when you get to this menu and you select a report, your screen's going to look a little like this. And it looks very similar to applicant search. Similar, but not exactly the same. On applicant search, it says filters and it looks a little different, but it's very similar. And you can search by interest type, by specific job. You can come find individual applicants if, you know, if you allow your hiring managers to do that. You know, HR admin, you guys get to see everything. Districts have the option to limit what hiring managers can and can't do. You know, you can come and search, you have all those different things. So after you've decided, you know, you can even expand your search further by hitting the plus sign and adding in preferences or endorsements, all those things, events, traits, anything. And then what I like to do when I am pulling a report, I always press the count button first to make sure there's going to be data before I actually do the preview. And off to the side of this count, you'll get a little number. It'll tell you what your results will be, like 5 or 20 or 150, depending. And then you're going to press preview, and it'll process and pull the actual report. Just like jobs reports, your output is going to default to PDF. But if you don't want that, you can switch and pick Excel or HTML. And same as job reports, if it doesn't open, check for a pop-up blocker. Sometimes it legitimately doesn't open because there's bad data. We've had some issues where one user has put in symbols in one of the fields, and symbols over the web can sometimes throw stuff off. And so if you ever get where you know it should open and it's just not opening, that's a great opportunity to contact the support team, and we'll dig into your data and figure out. I just saw a question come in, so, and it was about customizing reports. And yes, we're going to talk about custom reports very, very soon, so stay tuned. That's kind of a little later in the presentation. But yes, applicants sometimes do goofy stuff with their applications. We don't know why, and it can mess stuff up. So that's what the support team's here for. And you wouldn't think that a little ampersand or whatever can do goofy things, but if a field isn't designed for that, you wouldn't. Well, actually, you know what I found? I've had some applicants put emojis in some of the fields, and the database just doesn't know what an emoji is. And so every once in a while, it doesn't happen very often. So that's, you know, call the support team, we'll clean that stuff up, and then your reports work beautifully again. So here's an example of a very basic applicant report. It's just the applicant name listing. You know, on most of the reports, anybody who has the role of an employee has an asterisk, so you can quickly identify who your employees are. And we've added the S for substitutes if you're using that in your system to quickly identify who your subs and who your employees are. Okay, so that's job reports and that's applicant reports, and that's just the real quick on how to pull the data. Okay. Throughout the system, anytime there's a report that's not necessarily under a report menu, it's usually accessed by clicking on a PDF icon. An example would be when you're in applicant search, you open the applicant summary by clicking on the PDF icon. Under the job openings menu, applicants, you know, click on a PDF icon to look at your job postings and so on. So, and sometimes it might look like, you know, the list when you get the list of applicants for a job. So there are other areas throughout the system where you can pull a report a little differently, but it's usually, like I said, it's a PDF icon somewhere throughout the report. All right. You do have the option to change the name of your report. So if you don't like the name of the report or you want to call it something else, if you have the role of system manager, you can go in and change the names. We see this a lot on the PD side of things. Like they like to, instead of it being the clock hour report, they want to call it like Franklin Pierce official transcript or something. And so it's really simple. You would go to the System Manager menu and go to the Lookup Tables, and you go to the Shared Lookup Tables, and you would go and find the Reports table. And it looks like this. And then you would find the table, or you would find the report you want to update or change the name. And this is actually an old screenshot because it says Applicant Management. I forgot to update this. It should say Job Application System. So I always filter it by the portal, because you'll see if you're an employee records, there'll be employee records, there'll be job application, there'll be volunteer, there'll be professional development. You can portal or filter by the portal, find your report, and you would click on the pencil to open it and go to the next screen, and this is what it looks like. And you can change this title. That's really the only thing you can change. And you can rename it to whatever you want. You can also hide a report. So if you have reports showing up that you guys never ever use and you just don't want them to show up because they're annoying and they're in the way, you can also come and open the same screen, check in, oops, I always forget when you're in, I gotta go back, sorry. Check the box in here and save it, and then it won't show up in the drop-down box anymore. It's really important that you don't touch this file name or data source. If you go in there and change that, your report probably won't work, because that's where the system looks for your report and knows what to pull and what to display. That's where when we add like a custom report to your site, we know that the system knows that you have a custom report versus the stock report or something. So just be aware, and that you can go in and change the title to your heart's content and make it whatever you want. Okay, so that's reports. Now we have export information. The export information menu is actually available in 2 locations. It's the exact same menu, it's just you can find it in 2 spots, one underneath the Management tab and one underneath the System Manager tab. And this tool has a ton of reports that are all Excel-like reports. So you can sort them before you export them or after, and you can sort them lots of different ways. And I love Excel. I'm an Excel junkie. And that's, we'll kind of look at some of that. So I kind of listed, there's 26 stock exports available on a JAS site, from affirmative action to user roles. So you can look up applicants by their certificates, their education, licenses, preferences, traits, confidential job data, how they learned about you. You can get a hiring report, positions not filled, your router detail. You can, if you were a site that loaded all your employees, you can see who has not logged in and updated their password yet, and so on. And so these can be really, really helpful in some of your day-to-day stuff. Export informations are also great if there's data that you like to track. The support team, we can easily help build exports for you and add them to your site really quite simply, and they're a lot easier to put on a site than like an actual report, and there's a little less cost involved. Some of the reports can get complicated and stuff, so just know that you know, you often write a query and have that export added to your site, usually pretty quickly too. There's a lot quicker turnaround. So anyway, I like the exports. So let's kind of look at, so that when you go to export information, the screen looks like this, and you'll have this screen right here, and you can actually, in that view name box, start typing and filter down to find the export you're looking for. And then once you find the one you want to open it, it's as simple as clicking on the magnifying glass, and it opens and it looks something like this. This is the hiring report on the release site. And I filtered on this particular report. I started by filtering by interest type, and I filtered by job year. And then I started to get a list of my new hires for that job year. And you can see I've got my job ID numbers, my recommendation ID numbers, who was hired, their email, what position they were hired into, what their FTE, if I had an assignment, and so on. And actually the screen keeps going on quite a ways. I just didn't have room on my slide. So that's one of many exports available. And then I can export this to Excel, and I could keep on filtering or doing whatever I need to with that report. Some nice things about export information is you can actually go in and change the filtering options to help you with the sorting of your data. There's a little funnel on the right-hand side, and if you right-click on it, you can change the option. So on like this one, the created on, it defaults to equals to, should actually probably, that may be changed now, it should be date, or I guess whatever. You could change it to another one, greater than, less than, or like this one says begins with, contains. You know, you can change them to based on whatever the contents of the cells are. The filters may be slightly different, if that makes sense, hopefully. And then once you've got your data, oh, someone said they've logged in. Export information is under the Management tab and System Manager. So it's in two locations. Same information, but it's just under both tabs. And I don't know why they put it under both tabs. Sorry, someone asked that question. So export information. So after you've got the data you want, you can export the data out to Excel, and it opens in Excel, and you can do whatever you want, save it, and keep filtering, or you could export it to a PDF if you wanted as well. There's different ways you can use export information. Some examples of how you might use it. There's an export information called applicant screening information. Well, I might go and find the job that I'm working on, and maybe I've got some screening information in there already, or I, just pull the list of people anyway. I could filter to the job, so I have my list of applicants, export it, and then I could add columns to it when it's in Excel and add my own information. I could add notes, anything I want. Where when you have a regular report, you can't type and add data, and I can't save it and email my notes to someone else on my team if I wanted. So that's one way you could use an export. Another example of an export that I like to use, there's an export called router detail. Well, sometimes, when you have positions and something goes wrong with the routing, it's kind of a pain to go to the lookup tables and check everything. Well, there's an export information where I can just go type in that position name and find that position, and I can look and it'll display all the router information. I can see right away, is there a mistake in the routing? Do I have a mistake in my sequence? Did I skip something? What's wrong? Or I can check before I post a position, do I have my routing correct, without having to go and dig and find everything. Or I could find, routing just to see, So it's kind of nice. It's just quick, easy to get to the information without having to go dig for it. Another example is one of my favorite ways. I like data. I'm a data nerd. I like to create pivot tables and analyze data. So an example of how to use data is I went ahead and took the learned about data from the release site, and I created a pivot table to count all the different and summarize the different criteria of how applicants were learning about the site. And then I created a graph to make visuals so that we could maybe, so it could be a way to decide how a district might steer their recruitment efforts. So here's my, here's my data, here's my learned about, and then I'm going to filter it by kind of by year. So I'm going to pick my time frame for this year or what year I'm looking at. Because over time, this list is going to get bigger and bigger. And then I put it into Excel. I create my pivot table. And I've got my data here. You know, I've got this many people saw an advertisement, this many people here, here, and here. And then so I've got my pivot data here. And from that pivot data, I was able to create a graph and show that the majority of our applicants are, you know, finding out about us from the web, or, you know, our job postings on the web. You know, a lot of them are also hearing about us from district employees or so on, you know. So that might be helpful information just to see where are we getting our applicants from. So that's another way you can use data in the system. If that makes sense. Okay, so I'm kind of rambling. We get asked a lot about customizing reports and exports. Yes, any report in your system and any export in your system can be customized by client request. There are fees generally associated because we have typically we have programming fees associated. Like I said, export information, if it's something the support team can create for you, there's usually just a fee to have the programmers add it, and it's minimal. What we ask from clients is submit your request to the support email address, including what changes you want, you know, draw out your changes or, you know, explain them. You can also request to have a brand new report. If you know what you want, you know, let us know what you want. And we can work on getting that. And we'll work with you, we'll give you quotes and do everything, you know, and we don't do anything without your approval. So I want to show you some examples of custom reports that clients have created. This is a screening report that a client has, and on this report, it lists the client, so they pull it by job. So it lists the client and their overall status, you know, this person's incomplete, this person's complete. This is a certificated screen, you know, so they wanted to list their endorsement and what their certificate that the applicant listed. They wanted to know what their degrees they listed. They also wanted to know what things they were missing from their checklist, so they would know why they were incomplete. Because sometimes it might be something real small. And then they wanted to know how many of their references had been returned. And then they had come up with a scoring rubric of their references. They were able to, on this site, it's a 1 to 5 scale. So a 5 is the highest they could get. So it averages them based on the scale we come up with. So that's some example of a custom report. So when they go to screen for a job, they pull this report, and then they go to applicant search, and, you know, they can use this to help them with, you know, the screening process of who they're going to look further at, you know, to actually read, you know, those references and look deeper and see, you know, they might be able to screen people out. See, well, this person doesn't have the right endorsement or certificate for this particular position, so I'm not going to look at them right away. I'm going to look at these people because they're actually qualified to teach this subject or whatnot. This is a different type of custom report that another one of our districts requested. So this one shows how you can take multiple sources. So they use some information from the applicant summary, information from an addendum, information from their references, and their file screen, and they kind of organize it in a way to help them with their hiring process. So, you know, at this particular district, you know, foreign language, you know, the different languages they speak is, you know, kind of important. You know, they've listed their education here at top and their majors, and they got those certificates, endorsements right at the top, easy for them to see. Then this was the addendum, and they asked them right away, what grades are you interested in, you know, most interested in teaching? What's your experience? What subjects are you interested in teaching? Do you have a certificate? Do you have a BA? And you know, they have their own screening, and they have their own scale, and they know what's a good score or not. And then they took select responses from the references, put it down here, you know, if they've been observed, you know, and they have a special rating based on answers, and would they rehire stuff. So, you know, right here they've got this quick thing to help them, you know, kind of weed out and you know, screen out and screen in, I guess, their candidates. So that was something that a client wanted, and this is, you know, how they chose. This is the information that was important to them to have kind of on a one-page, at a glance, so to speak, to help them in their screening process. Another client, they have an addendum. They ask their secondary people about coaching, you know, and so then they ask all their secondary people, you know, and so we, you know, what their, you know, what their endorsements and certificates are, and then are you interested in coaching, and what are you interested in, what sports, do you have any experience, are there any clubs, you know, and then what are they missing on their checklist and in the references, so that then they can help, you know, they have that information, so when they're hiring, that maybe they can help fill some of these other things at that same time. Here's a job report. You know, we have a client, they created this. It's simple, it just takes their current open positions so that they can send out this to their in-district staff just so they can announce what's open, you know, when they have a nice, pretty report format showing, hey, this is what's currently open. We even do a lot of custom exports. I have a client, they've created a nice export so they have data to load into their payroll system so they're not hand entering people when they hire them. And we've set everything up so it has the locations and their bargaining units into the codes that their system accepts. You know, we put in all the right things and stuff, so it loads directly into that particular system that they use. I've got, we have clients that use their online application for their annual transfer process. So they have an addendum that they put online, and they have their in-district staff go in, and it's like applying for a job, but really they're applying for an in-district transfer, and then they go in and they answer the addendum and they kind of say, you know, I'd like to transfer from this building or this FTE or whatever. And then it's put into an export, and the district has all that information. They can, you know, export it, and they have, you know, they can go through and they can work on getting that transfer data to help move people into new buildings or new positions or new assignments based on that addendum and that export information. So there's lots of possibilities. Actually, if you're interested, you know, I mean, I didn't even know which samples to show you. If you have a screening process and you need data to help you in that, I've made a lot of screening exports for districts to help them. You know, I don't even know where to begin, but, you know, they like to look at certain things. So we've created exports to kind of compile that into an easier way for them to do that. Yes, there are some additional fees for reports. It just depends on the scope of the work. Someone asked about the fees. And that's where we can talk and you know, you kind of tell me what you're looking at, and I can tell you what it might be, and we kind of go from there. We don't, but yes, we kind of work with you one-on-one to see what it would be. That's my ramble. So other questions about reports? The other thing I am more than happy to do is to show you where to find data in the system. You might just, you know, the data is probably there, you just don't necessarily know where to find data. And if you want to set up kind of a one-on-one meeting with the support team and say, you know, we're struggling with this, Deb or myself or even Sherry, we love to kind of help put on our thinking caps and help you kind of come up with, well, maybe if you, we could look at this and we'll help you with that. I'm kind of rambling. I saw another question. I got to pull it up real quick. Sorry, guys, so I can answer it. I'm not doing a very good job here with the chat. Yes. Okay, so I know someone asked about confidential references and how we have, some of them have a average count. A lot of districts on their references will have like maybe 5 options, like excellent, good, average, or something like that. And then we create a scale, like excellence a 5, good is a 4, you know, and so on. And then the system knows for each answer what that number would be. And then the system tallies up all the scores and then averages it out. Yeah. And so it takes the average from the completed references, and that's where the score comes from. So it pulls the info from those completed references that you already have in your system now, the completed data. Does that kind of answer your question, Catherine? Hopefully. If you want, I could actually show you an example. I could send you an example of some data. I could send you a nice email that shows you how it's tabulated and stuff. Takes me a little while. I don't know what one's saved on my computer, but I have one I could show you. But anybody else have questions for me? It's been a while since I've done a webinar, so I'm a little out of practice, so I apologize. I will send all of you a copy of my PowerPoint. I know what I wanted to show you before I forget. Okay, let me exit out of here. So on your, I'm just going to go, I'm on Bellingham. On the resources tab of everybody's portal, I am adding, if it's not there yet, I've updated documentation about the reports and export information. So if it's not there now, it will be there by the end of tomorrow, because I don't know if I'll get to it today. And so it looks like this. So it goes into much more detail than even my PowerPoint about reports and pulling the reports and all that. And so that will be on your site. It even talks more about custom reports. So that that's kind of been my project this fall, is I was working on updating documentation. I've got a bunch done on the PD site, and now I'm turning my focus back to the job site. And the other thing that you will see is that there is a link here that I'm adding, and it's recordings of the training webinars. So if you click on this, it'll take you to a Google site that has a link to all of our past webinars, and it'll have the handouts, and you can a link so you can click and go back, and you can find the webinars from last year, and I'll add this year's and everything. So if you're, you can kind of peruse and find information if you're stuck on stuff, or even if you want to find the handouts and look at information and stuff. So that'll be there. And as we make them, we'll be adding more videos to help you on just things that have to do with your portal. The other thing that I just added, and I'm adding, is I've updated the documentation on user roles, and I think you'll find it makes a lot more sense than what was there before. So that's also brand new on sites and stuff, and that'll be there also, like hopefully by tomorrow on all the sites if it's not on your site yet. So that's a big push of mine, is getting documentation updated and just making sure you guys have access to resources to help you be successful and stuff. And it has, I don't know, I'm kind of rambling, but don't hesitate to contact either Deb or myself, that support at HRM Plus. Email us. I'm on my email a lot, so is Deb, when we shouldn't be, and we, the nice thing about emailing that is if one of us, it always gets to somebody. So if she's out or I'm out, someone's always monitoring that, or call the 1-877 phone number, and somebody's usually there. You can always email either myself or Deb directly too, but the nice thing about the support is a little easier to remember, and if I'm on vacation, you know, she'll be answering. If she's on vacation, I'll be answering it. So just know that. Okay, trying to think if there's anything else I want to just show you before I forget. I said I'm a little out of practice. Questions? Anybody have anything for me? So, yeah, I encourage people to play around with export information. We add to this a lot as a whole. We think of stuff like, oh, this would be really helpful for clients to have this, and so we add things here. And if you think of stuff, you might think of a custom thing, like, oh, it'd be really great to have this, and we might say, you know what, everybody should have that. And then if that's the case, you know, it wouldn't be a custom thing. We would just I'd go to the programmers and say, no, this needs to be an everybody thing. And that's happened in some cases, especially we find that a lot on the pro dev side of things, because it just makes sense. There's some things that, you know, just really should be there for everybody. Like, I bet you didn't know that there's a whole export info on your archive people. You know, so you can come and get a list of your archived applicants here. That's there. I love the user roles. There's one on page 2 here about user roles. So you can come and look at, and this is for all portals. It's not just for your online application. And so if you look at like that user role documentation, you need to know which portal to look on. So if on the jobs is portal 1, you can get a list of anybody's roles. So I can look up Mr. HR Director, and I've got a list of every role he has. Sometimes this is easier for me than going to the user accounts and wading through all their roles. I can come and see right away, those are the roles he has. You know, or I can pull a list of everybody in my system that has HR admin to see if, you know, if I'm keeping up with people, because, you know, people leave the district, and I'm keeping up and remembering to take away access when people leave. So it's nice to know some of these experts can help you kind of with some of your business practices, so you're keeping things up to date and, you know, just doing, I don't know, I'm rambling. So anyway, I'm going to kind of leave it at that. So questions, you know, feel free to type in the chat or unmute yourself and feel free to talk.